Denis Villeneuve was recently interviewed in conjunction with the Shanghai International Film Festival. In this interview, he revealed a lot about the process behind adapting Dune and the challenges that came with it. In this video, I'd like to review some of the points I found most interesting in this interview and what they reveal about this upcoming adaptation of Frank Herbert's iconic novel. To see the entire hour-long interview, be sure to check the description below. Villeneuve started off by talking about the effects that the current pandemic has had on the production of this movie. He indicated that he had the luxury of time after initial filming was done, but lockdown started going into place right as they were planning on doing some additional shooting. He says that now, given the current situation, it will be a sprint to finish the movie on time, saying that the pandemic effectively crushed his schedule. Some parts of the post-production process were affected more than others by the current restrictions. One of the biggest challenges he talked about was in editing the film, which he refers to as perhaps the most important part of filmmaking. He said editing is where you can improve the story and create fear, joy, and tension. It was especially painful for him being separated from his editor and limited to video conferencing. He truly missed the energy of being in the same room. He likened it to playing music with someone and benefiting from that human interaction, that spontaneity and energy. He also indicated that there was a similar effect from not being able to work in the same room with Hans Zimmer, the composer for the film. What has worked well with the current restrictions is the work on the visual effects for the movie, because that's a process where it's not as challenging to him as an artist to have the distance. He could give input on what he wanted, and then 1 or 2 weeks later would see the results. Villeneuve goes on to talk about how he was introduced to Dune as a teenager and marveled at it, citing the beauty and richness of the cultures, being moved by Paul's journey through the first novel and how the book opened his eyes to the politics of the exploitation of the world's resources. I really appreciate the fact that Denis commented on the politics of Frank Herbert's novel. Many people are concerned about how modern-day film properties are often becoming overly politicized. However, it's good to keep in mind that Frank Herbert did include many themes that were considered to be very progressive for the time. So there is definitely a basis for including those elements in this adaptation. However, the themes present in Dune are beautifully woven into the story. They are part of it, so it feels organic, not artificial or cheap as is the case with other modern film and television offerings. In Denis' words, it's a very complex, powerful book that tells a universal story that is strong, simple, that approaches very strong subject matters at the same time. He then talks about how Dune has been his ultimate dream project that has been in his mind throughout his career. The story of Dune has certainly made a lasting impression on him and his body of work. In fact, later in the interview, he mentions that he started doing storyboards for Dune at age 12 or 13 with a childhood friend. He also mentions that Dune is a project that allows him to explore the impact of landscape on the human soul. As Paul journeys further into the barren desert of Arrakis, the emptiness of the landscape helps us to dive deeper into Paul's character. Denis also dives into the challenges and excitement of the casting process and brought out how important it is for an actor to trigger creativity inside the director. Timothée Chalamet was the only name on Denis' list for Paul Atreides, namely because of his youthful appearance and the depth of his acting ability, how something in his eyes gives the impression of an old soul. He says that Chalamet also has insane charisma, which is vital for his character to become the leader as he is portrayed in the book. He then details that all the actors were cast for very specific reasons. Jason Momoa for his bohemian relationship with adventure, his elegance on screen, and his fantastic smile. Many Dune fans have expressed concern with how Momoa does not appear to be agile or graceful enough to play the character of the swordmaster Duncan Idaho. However, in this interview, Villeneuve mentions that Momoa was like a ballet dancer when he fights, and that he brings a knighthood kind of elegance, bravado, and a sense of humor. So the director is obviously very happy with how Momoa portrays this fan-favorite character. He then talks about the casting of Josh Brolin, who he has worked with before. He describes Brolin's character Gurney Halleck as a grouchy poet, and how the actor had the charisma needed to help the audience to understand that even though he's a bit raw, he's also Paul's best friend. Oscar Isaac he refers to as one of the best actors working today, and how he completely fits the description of the Duke. Stephen McKinley Henderson, who will portray the human computer Toofer Howat, was cast based on the intelligence in his eyes and how he looks like a huggable teddy bear. I think this shows that Villeneuve is determined to emphasize the warmth and close relationship between Paul and his teachers. Denis also cast Rebecca Ferguson spontaneously for many reasons, citing her ability to portray the complex layers of Lady Jessica. He also mentioned the legend of Charlotte Rampling as an actress being a driving force in her casting as the Reverend Mother, and that he's wanted to work with her for many years. In casting the villainous Vladimir Harkonnen, he mentioned another one of his favorite actors, Stellan Skarsgård, who he's also wanted to work with for the last 25 years, noting the fear that the actor can instill on set. David Dastmalchian, who was cast as Piter de Vries, is an old friend of Villeneuve who the director said he wants to use in all of his movies because of the way he creates characters. Much the same was the case with Dave Bautista's casting as Beast Raban, who Denis referred to as the sweetest person on earth, but also the most frightening. The casting of Chang Chen's Dr. Yue was affected mostly by his naturalism in previous projects. He then goes on to talk about his methods in working with actors, emphasizing the importance of good preparation and working with actors on an intellectual level to make sure that the logic and the ideas presented in their scenes are clear. In this process, it will sometimes occur that dialogue will be replaced with a look that the actor can give. Villeneuve said that he wants to avoid the tendency for the dialogues to be overwritten, knowing much can be communicated by the actors in a nonverbal way. This requires him to communicate well with the actors and to be a good listener as a director. This doesn't mean that he encourages improvisation, but rather he just wants to give the actors space, bringing out the importance of letting the emotions carry the impact of a scene. He then spends quite a bit of time talking about the directors and other individuals that have had a big influence on his career. Among these, he refers to Spielberg, Kubrick, Christopher Nolan, Ridley Scott, and Ingmar Bergman, along with various other French directors and a pair of French-Canadian directors from Quebec, whose impact is always present with Villeneuve in any project he's working on. He closes out commenting on the progress of computer-generated imaging, acknowledging that it's often a useful tool, but reiterating the benefits of practical effects on the creative process. He highlighted how important the environment was to the actors' performances, and I appreciate this probably the most about his filmmaking process. Too often, modern filmmakers rely heavily on special effects and green screens, and the result is often a story that suffers and performances that are hard to believe, so I applaud his efforts in filming on location in Jordan and in Norway. He brought out computer technology is important in adding necessary finishing touches, expanding on the scope of the worlds featured in this film, but that the core elements around the actors needed to be real. They built huge sets, and he noted that the presence of these real elements was like food for inspiration, stating his determination to always fight as a director to have as much reality as possible. Considering what we've seen from promotional footage so far, it's clear that with Villeneuve's minimalist approach, he is striving to do just that. But let me know your thoughts on these highlights from this interview. Do these comments encourage you about the direction of the film? Or are there other questions about this adaptation that you'd like to hear answered from the director? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a thumbs up if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy content. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.